Shabbat Shalom. So this week's Torah portion is found in the book of Deuteronomy, where Moses and the nation of Israel, they're finally in the land, or the plains of Moab. They're right outside the land. They're about to enter in. But before they do, Moses writes Deuteronomy, where he gives the nation of Israel the final instructions on how to remain faithful to God when they enter into the land. Now, if you've ever read through Deuteronomy before, you may have thought to yourself, boy, these laws sound familiar. And that's because Deuteronomy is literally a retelling of the law. So, for example, in Deuteronomy 5, we have an account of the Ten Commandments, which we found in Exodus. In Deuteronomy 14, we have the clean and unclean animals, which you find in Leviticus. And so much of Deuteronomy is what we call a second law. That's literally what it means. And Moses is retelling this law for this new generation. However, before you think to yourself, well, I've read Exodus all the way through Numbers, I don't need to read Deuteronomy then because I already know that information, keep in mind that the second law is not just copy-paste. It's not like Moses had Exodus next to him and he was just copying over the laws just so that Israel could have it. Instead, Moses is now 40 years older, and he's 40 years wiser. And so now as he's speaking to this new community about these laws, he's not just giving them the law, he's reapplying it to them in their current situation. The book of Deuteronomy begins, in the land of Moab, Moses undertook to expound the law, meaning to clarify it. So as you read Deuteronomy, you're going to see how Moses provides more details, new applications, and even new laws at some points so that Israel remains obedient to God. Yeshua did a very similar thing in the Sermon on the Mount, where he spoke about the heart of the law and what true obedience to God actually looks like. So if you have not spent the time going through Deuteronomy, I would encourage you follow it through the parasha over the next few months and be able to see how Moses is guiding the nation. Now, the book of Deuteronomy begins with a historical account. Moses, in the first 3 chapters, explains all of the places that Israel went in the wilderness, the people that they fought against, and the reason is to highlight the faithfulness of God. Moses is saying, look back at what God has done, and in that way, you'll have confidence to walk forward in obedience to God's commands. And that's actually a great model for us as well. For some, the past, our past, could be a scary place, could be a place full of regret, but Moses tells us how to interact with it. You look back and you see God's hand. Don't dwell in the past, but you look back to see God's hand and you walk forward with the confidence that the Lord is with you. After these first 3 chapters of the historical account, we come to our parasha for this week. And the parasha is Va'etchanan. Can we say that together? Va'etchanan. Hebrew verb, and it means, and I implored. And this is where you see the vulnerability of Moses. You see, in Numbers, when Moses was disobedient, God said to him, you are not going to enter into the land anymore. And so now in Deuteronomy, Moses, after the historical account, he pleads before God one last time, asking him, please change that judgment. Please let me go in. He said, let me, I pray, cross over and see the fair land that is beyond the Jordan. Let me enter in. But what did God say? No. God did not change the judgment. And here we see the reality that sometimes God says no to prayer requests. How do we respond when God closes a door that we're convinced should be open? Paul underwent this exact same issue in 2 Corinthians. When he asked God to remove that thorn out of his flesh. He said, I implored the Lord 3 times that it might leave me. But God said no. And what we see in the situation of Paul and of Moses is that God doesn't just say no and leave you. Instead, God says no, but he sustains you in that situation so you could continue to grow. For Paul, God said, no, I'm not going to remove it. But Paul understood the thorn in the flesh kept him humble. It stopped him from boasting. For Moses, God said, no, you cannot enter the land. But God gave Moses the opportunity to raise up Joshua, the next leader who was going to bring Israel in and keep them faithful to the Lord. So Moses, he could have felt jealousy and anger as he implored the Lord to let him in. He could have been angry at this closed door, but instead he kept his eyes focused on the bigger picture of what God was doing, and he remained faithful to God's narrative. And so this is the challenge for us as well. It's easy to neglect our responsibilities sometimes. We get angry, we get jealous, we get hurt. We think that things do not work out the way we wanted. But we must remember that the God who sustained Moses and who sustained Paul is the same God today who sustains you and I to remain faithful as we continue to build his kingdom. So here we have that model in Moses. Finally, as we come to the end of our Torah portion, Moses spends the remainder of his space warning Israel, be obedient. Don't make any intermarriage with the people who are in there. Don't make foreign alliances with the nations. Don't engage in idolatry. Remain obedient. And all of that could be summed up in that one iconic foundational phrase in Deuteronomy 6:4 that we just sang, the Shema. This is the statement that Yeshua said when he was asked, what's the most important law? This is what he pointed to, this section right here. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Now this passage, what does that actually mean, that he's one? This passage has been used in a lot of debates about God's nature. Is he plurality? Is he compound unity? Is he absolute singularity? And both sides will use this passage to defend their viewpoint. But that misses the point of Moses here. Many interpreters today properly note that Deuteronomy 6:4 has nothing to do with the nature of God, about being singular or plural. Instead, a better way to translate Deuteronomy 6:4 is, listen, hear, O Israel, the Lord, his name, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. He is the only one who we are to worship. That's why he's the only one whom you love and give your dedication to. The key to obedience is understanding the uniqueness of God and that he alone deserves your worship. And so, in this day and age, you always have counterfeit gods that want your attention. Money, fame, adoration from people, the things that we feel give us fulfillment. But like Yeshua said, no one can serve two masters. So this morning, we have this question before us. Is the Lord our God, the Lord alone? Is he the only one whom we worship? So as we stand together and as we worship the Lord, my challenge to all of us is to have that tunnel vision, to focus only on the one true God of Israel, because he's the only one who deserves our praise this morning. Shabbat Shalom.